Good morning. My name is Catherine Loughnane, and it's my privilege to bring you the good news today on Thursday, June the 3rd. Today's gospel reading comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 18, verses 1 to 8. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, "In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my opponent.' For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" It is thought that Luke the evangelist may have been a physician, a historian, and/or an artist. His writings reveal a well-educated man with a classical education. His gospel displays a better knowledge of classical literature and Hebrew scripture than is found in other parts of the New Testament. It is thought that he was a Hellenized Jew or a Gentile who had converted and studied scripture in depth. He addressed his gospel to a Greco-Roman audience, converts with a classical background. Names are important in the Bible, as deconstructed, they can often tell us about a person's character or personality. Luke dedicated this gospel to Theophilus, allegedly to confirm the truth of matters in which he had already been instructed. The name means lover of God in Greek. We don't know whether Theophilus was a friend, a patron, or whether the author is using him as a literary device, a way of speaking to all lovers of God, ourselves included. The Gospel of Luke is the longest of the four canonical Gospels. Luke not only wrote this Gospel, he was also the author of Acts and one of Paul's traveling companions. He appears to have written at around 80 CE, at about the same time as Matthew's. In putting his Gospel together, he incorporated material from the earlier Gospel of Mark, and, as he tells us, information from those who were eyewitnesses and servants of the Word. One half of the material in Luke's Gospel is unique to this Gospel. This includes 17 parables, of which the story of the unjust judge and the poor widow is one. Jesus used parables a great deal in his teaching. There are two intertwined themes embedded in this text. One has to do with the importance and efficacy of prayer, and the other of our need to fight for justice. They are interrelated. There were two systems of justice in place in Palestine at that time, the Jewish system and the Roman system. Under the Jewish system, elders adjudicated disputes. The expectation of Jewish judges is articulated in a passage from today's reading from Deuteronomy, chapter 16, verses 18 to 20. "You shall appoint judges and officials throughout your tribes, in all your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall render just decisions for the people. You must not distort justice. You must not show partiality, and you must not accept bribes. For a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. Justice and only justice you shall pursue, so that you may live and occupy the land that the Lord your God is giving you." Under the Roman system, the system we're dealing with, municipal judges were appointed by Herod or the Romans. Luke tells us that this judge does not fear God or respect people. Notorious in Jesus' day, these magistrates were pagan men and privileged members of an imperial system which looked down on those it had colonized. Luke focuses on the marginalized and impoverished in his gospel and gives a prominent role to women who at that time and in that culture had little freedom and were largely confined to the home and domestic activity. In the parable, the powerful judge is confronted by a widow, one of the most vulnerable members of society. Widows had no power or social standing and were typically marginalized and impoverished. In modern parlance, the message of this parable can be summarized by the American saying, "The squeaky wheel gets the most oil." This parable shows how, despite a major imbalance of power and a lack of sympathy on the part of a judge, justice can be effected. It is the persistence of the woman that finally wears down the unjust judge and motivates him to give her a just settlement against her opponent so that she will not continue to bother him. Jesus is making the point that whether or not judges are sympathetic, we need to keep on petitioning them until they provide us with a just solution. There is hope that even in the midst of systemic injustice, justice may be done. This is an incredibly timely message for us today. There are so many issues that require immediate attention that it is hard to keep track of them, let alone prioritize them. In Canada, people of color have been subjected to systemic racism and marginalized. We all need to become squeaky wheels in support of the truth and reconciliation and Black Lives Matter movements. We are complicit by virtue of our colonial past and cannot sit back. We need to ask these communities not only forgiveness, but help them put pressure on those in authority who have the responsibility and the power to effect real change. Marginalized people have been subjected to systemic racism for millennia. In Jesus' day, Galileans like him were considered country bumpkins by the authorities in Jerusalem. Nonetheless, Jesus challenged the status quo, stood up to authority, and spoke truth to power. The Jews considered befriending Samaritans and eating with Gentiles anathema, but Jesus did both. To give hope to the marginalized, he declared subversively that the final judgment, the first would be last, and the last would be first, and the poor would inherit the earth. That did not please the authorities. We cannot right every wrong in our lifetime, but we must never give up hope and never stop advocating for social justice. Prophetic leaders are not confined to the Old Testament. They keep appearing with their clarion calls to justice. Theologian Scott Lewis points out that, in quotes, "Our takeaway from the prophets is that God demands from us justice and compassion toward our fellow human beings, and God will not take no for an answer. When we continually and obstinately ignore these demands, we sow the seeds for our own downfall." We are at a tipping point. The white supremacist movement in North America is in the ascendant, and if left unchecked, could turn passive resistance into bloody conflagration. Worse still, fundamentalist readings of the Old Testament are often called to support the position of right-wing groups. We have to understand that the Old Testament message was written in the Bronze Age, and it does not belong in the context of our own times. The creation is ongoing, and we have evolved intellectually, socially, politically, and spiritually during the last 4,000 plus years. And in 1 CE, we were challenged by Jesus to form communities which demonstrate love, inclusiveness, and a sharing of resources. That's the New Testament, the new understanding of the law from God. Senator Raphael Warnock, a Baptist preacher from the state of Georgia, who was elected the first black senator in the United States in January, is speaking truth to power as he stands up against Republicans who remain blindly loyal to Donald Trump. He has a huge job ahead of him, but is a beacon and an inspiration. Last month, the Honorable Murray Sinclair, first Aboriginal judge in Manitoba, was appointed Chancellor of Queen's University. He realizes that change must start in academe, in history departments and law schools. He plans to challenge the way in which Canadian history omits, undermines, and belittles the role of Aboriginal peoples and the way in which the laws of our country negatively impact them. He acknowledges the great challenge that lies ahead, but believes that the time has come. One of the major themes in Luke is the importance of prayer. In Psalm 80, one of today's readings, the psalmist asks, "What are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them?" And in Psalm 50, another of today's readings, he writes, "The heavens declare his righteousness, but God himself is judge." At the end of our gospel passage, Jesus points out that if an unjust judge responds to the petition of one of the least powerful members of society, how much more can we expect from a loving God who is the ultimate judge? And so he tells us to keep on praying. Prayer takes many forms, one of which is activism. Like the widow, we need to find ways to effect change today and wrestle justice from unjust judges. Thank you for being part of this wonderful community of faith. Have a good day.